Advice from a software engineer with 8 years of experience is the blog post I'm reading today. This is really interesting to me because I've been in software engineering for a while now. And I want to see if I agree or disagree with any of these tips that Benoit is going to go over in this blog post. And my apology in advance if I'm mispronouncing the name. Let's hop into it. Practical tips for those who want to advance their careers. My name is Benoit, and I have been a software engineer for the past 8.5 years. I stayed at my previous and first company for 7.5 years, and then I joined a new one in early 2022. Wow, this is a long time to be at your first company, because a lot of times your first company is not really like you don't know what you don't know, so you join the company and then you decide to change course in what you want to specialize in. I wouldn't say it's uncommon for people to leave their first job a little bit sooner than that. This article comes from a recent self-reflection on things I wish I had started doing earlier in my career and things I wish I had done differently. Okay, let's go. What I'm sharing here may be useful to any junior to mid-level developer who wishes to improve and progress towards a title of senior and beyond. Okay. My career evolution. Before diving into the main subject, here's my career evolution. I interned for 3 months at a startup, which quickly became a scale-up company. There's 3 main cycles in software. There's the initial stage when you're developing, let's say for a startup, something in the beginning. Then there's a scaling part where a team takes it to the next level and makes it more reliable and scalable and kind of service more people with that software. And then there's a maintenance stage where there's really not many new features and not much scaling going on, but the emphasis is on not breaking things at that point. And sounds like Benoit was interning for 3 months at a startup in that scale up stage. After that, I did a full year of work study, spending 3 months at a school and 9 months at work. Then I got hired as a full-time software engineer and kept the title for 3.5 years. Quickly after introduction to the tech career ladder, I promoted to senior software engineer. I kept this title for 3 years until I left the company, at which point the tech teams accounted for approximately 200 people. Okay, so it's a relatively small company that was growing fast, as if I am reading this correctly. Then step 5, I joined as a software engineer 2 at a company with thousands of tech employees. Despite the title downgrade at the second company, I have been trying to keep the same responsibilities and more as before. That makes sense. Generally, if you go from a smaller company with a higher title to a much bigger, more established company, you will probably see title downgrade, but not necessarily pay downgrade or responsibility downgrade. That's a nice graph breakdown of internship, school, work study, software engineer, senior software engineer, and software engineer 2 over here. Okay. In the beginning, I was part of the front-end team. The tech organization was split between back-end and front-end developers. At the time, we were no more than 30 engineers. When our new CTO arrived a year later, he introduced an organization based on feature teams, the Spotify model. I'm not familiar with Spotify model. Maybe we'll look at that next. Although there was some friction at the start, people don't like change. This organization definitely turned out to be for the better. I stayed for more than 5 years in the same feature team. I was there at its inception. So throughout the years, I became tech referent of the project. Eventually, I joined another team where I worked until I left for a whole new adventure a year later. All right, enough with the context. I hope you all enjoy reading the rest and that the following advice will be actionable for your career progression. All right, cool. Let's dig into it. Things I wish I had started doing earlier. Write a work log. A work log is a document that contains a list of tasks you have accomplished. The granularity and the type of tasks don't matter as long as you keep track of what you did. Yeah, this is a very legit advice, I can already tell you. You can fill in this document at the frequency you want. I would advise doing that on a weekly basis. Tasks done during the week are still fresh on Friday, so you won't struggle writing them down. Yeah, this is a big one. I've struggled with this a little bit here and there. There have been many times where I didn't write down what I did, thinking that, okay, on Monday, maybe I'll get to it. Next week comes around, and by the end of that week, I barely can remember what I did the week ago because so many more bugs, features, and issues came up and this week, and I lost the context of what I was doing the week before, and it feels like a chore to go back and find that. So I definitely agree with this advice. It's easier to do while it's still fresh in your head. this work log important for the following two reasons. To remind yourself of all the things you have done over the past 6 to 12 months. This is very valuable during performance reviews, so you can show your manager what you have accomplished and why you deserve to raise. Yeah, 100%. Definitely will help with that because people forget. If you're forgetting things from 2 weeks ago, your manager might also forget, and that's very understandable. That should help you out there. To keep track of projects, notable responsibilities, and critical numbers. Decrease latency by X% for critical service that you had over your career. This is great for completing your resume whenever you want to venture into the waters of the hiring market. Yep. In general, you want to keep your resume up to date just in case. You never know. Even if you're happy at the company, just keep it up to date. It's a good thing to do. Occasionally, you're just going to swap out some bullets for better bullets. And when you are ready to look for a new job, it will be awesome. Your resume is already ready to go and there's nothing to do. So definitely a good advice there. I started writing a work log roughly 2 years before leaving my first company. So over the past 8.5 years, my work log contains only 3 years of data with some gaps here and there. When I had to write my resume and later in 2021, I had to rely on my memory to remember what I did during the first 5 years of my career. To say the least, it took me some time to remember everything valuable, and I'm sure I forgot some of them. Yeah, but 100%. I would definitely forget some of them. You can use work log template if you want to. Personally, I have been using Microsoft Notes for the first 2 years, and I switched to Google Doc with bullet points, one list for each month of the year. Yeah, I really don't think it matters. Whatever it is that you enjoy, I think is going to be the best method, because if you see it as a ultimate chore at the end of the week, then you're probably not going to do it. So just pick whatever is your preferred method. Leave the comfort zone. This is the best way to learn and become a better developer. The comfort zone is the scope, environment in which you feel comfortable doing your job. It is the teammates you already know and work with daily, the projects you have been working on for years, the responsibilities you have been carrying on, and so on. But why would someone advise you to leave this wonderful situation? Because this environment is not suitable for evolution. Sure, if you stay in this bubble, you're an efficient person. You already know who to talk to about specific subject and what file in a code base has to be changed. But what is better than one efficient person? Several efficient people. Once you have reached the comfort zone on a particular topic, you should look for mentoring people so they become comfortable with the topic, and look for something new outside of your comfort zone. Yeah, I generally agree with this. I would say there's some caveats here. If you go in too many directions too fast, it might actually be a net negative, both for you and for your team. However, if you do notice that this year is starting to feel like the year before and you really know what you're doing all the time, then yeah, definitely venture out a little bit beyond your comfort zone. Mentoring is one of the responsibilities that is expected from a senior position. I don't really agree with that. You could be mentoring somebody that's in a higher role than you if you know more about a specific subject that you're mentoring them about. It's a great way of helping our coworkers to be more efficient quickly. You become a force multiplier. As for new things to do, it could be anything. Here's a non-exhaustive list for inspiration. Contribute to a team organization project you never had the chance to touch before because it was always assigned to the same person who was in their comfort zone. Write documentation about a topic you're comfortable with. The objective is to share your knowledge and then directly mentor people so they can get this knowledge faster than you did. Also, writing is a great skill to learn and improve. Yeah, 100%. As software engineers, we write a lot. Be it for documentation, emails, instant messages, RFCs, blog posts, or anything else. I definitely agree quite a bit with this. It is very helpful to write documentation because it allows you to organize your thoughts and identify things you don't really know well enough to put on paper. And at that point, it's like an aha moment and you go and dig for that information, you figure it out. You fill those blanks, and also it will make onboarding easier for you. Volunteer to participate in cross-team projects. You can take a leadership position during this project to feed two birds with one hand. Yeah, maybe if you have time, if you're excelling in the things that you already normally do, then sure, this could be a good one. I would also be a little bit cautious about it. Just because you don't want to take on too much work that's not your direct responsibility and end up getting burnt out. Burnout is like a real thing in this field, and I would caution you against doing too much of this here. Take care of improving tooling, monitoring, or team organization process. Yeah, people will really appreciate this. Participate in meetups organized by the company. Join a community/guild at the company to work on org level, cross-team projects. Yeah, I've done this a couple of times before. Again, don't stretch yourself too thin. Don't do all of these at the same time. Maybe over time, one by one. Help the hiring team by conducting technical interviews and or checking take-home exercises from candidates. Yeah, 100% definitely do interviews, participate in interviews. It's good for you. It's good to see how the company does it. It allows you to have a say in who the company hires. It also gives you a different perspective. The goal is to learn something new. Performance reviews can help you define what to do and how to do it when stepping outside of your comfort zone. But you don't have to wait for this moment to make the move. You can do that at any time as long as your manager is aware of it. For instance, you could talk about it during a one-on-one meeting. One of the core objectives of your manager is to help you progress in your career, so I highly recommend talking with them before leaving your comfort zone. This is also good advice because you want to involve your manager in your career growth. You want them to be invested in you getting to that next level, right? Definitely good advice there. There may be some subjects you don't really care about. In my case, for a long time, I didn't want to learn anything related to machine learning and data analytics. But my curiosity and thirst for knowledge eventually led me on a path of these topics. Even though I didn't get the chance to work on the company projects based on these fields, I am glad I learned about them. It is great to have meaningful conversations with my peers, and it could even help me find ideas I couldn't get without this knowledge. If you want to progress in your career, I strongly encourage you to leave your comfort zone and learn new things every time you get a chance. And I'm pretty sure this advice also applies to one's personal life too. Be curious about other teams and projects. This one is close to the previous one, though you don't have to endorse additional responsibility. For a long time, I did not care about teams and projects outside of my team's scope. Our product had some dependencies with services owned by other teams, but as long as the API between them and us was clearly defined, we didn't have to know anything about their services. To be honest, I don't find this to be true, at least from my experiences. If you have a bug that's happening somewhere between two services, like a lot of times you have to go dig in a little bit into the other side to understand if the bug is on their end or your end. Like, I don't think it's very clear cut in every case. Some of the more complex bugs I came across probably have been to do with multiple services involved and having to debug multiple things to understand where the problem is. I haven't really been able to not look at other services adjacent to my team. This is good advice, but in my case, I haven't had the luxury to not look at other teams' projects. The only time we had to open the box and see how things worked was when we had to contribute to these projects. As we were organized in feature teams, if we needed some changes in one of our other projects of the company, we had to make these changes ourselves. Each feature team had its own roadmap, so we couldn't ask another team to do the work for us. Although we were slow at first, with the help of other teams, we progressively became more efficient when contributing to other projects. This has not been my experience. Although I had to look at different projects and services surrounding mine, I generally don't have to actually fix the bug, do a feature in their repository necessarily. It's just something that I might help define or help understand together. And then from there, generally that team takes responsibility there. I guess it's a different org structure. But for the other services that we didn't directly interact with, I had no idea how they worked and what was their precise role in the system. It was when I joined the on-call team years later that I really started having a look at all services of the company. When I finally got the full picture, it felt great. I had better understanding of what could be the root cause when things go wrong. I knew why we needed that particular service, so why we made that data store choice. Finally, piecing everything together after years of bringing value to the company provided an awesome feeling of, oh, now I get it. Yeah, it does feel really good to understand the full picture. When things start clicking, it's a really good feeling, and it makes everything else a little bit easier, I think. If you can, take a look at other projects and teams at your company. Read their internal wiki pages, attend their demos, and read their public documentation. I mean, again, if you have time, it's hard to find time to do this kind of stuff. This is something you could do from time to time. It doesn't have to be sustained effort. Yeah, this is probably the key. If you have a slower week than usual and you have the time and the curiosity for that, then yeah, go ahead. But I don't think it's easy to sustain. You're basically doing multiple jobs if you're going to be all the time doing this thing where you get involved in other teams' work. Bonus: if you can draw a diagram and write some documentation about the full picture, do it. Chances are a lot of people in an organization will thank you for that. Yeah, I found that to be true. I have done some diagrams of how different services communicate and work with each other, and have then sent that information on to other developers that needed to see that, and always had a very positive response. And plus, I'm a visual learner, so I often refer to those diagrams myself. So that's been also my experience here. Notice that you do not have to produce anything here compared to the previous advice regarding the comfort zone. All you need is to be curious, read documentation from other teams, and ask questions. You might meet people from other teams along the way, and you may discover projects that you really want to work on. Again, if you have the time to do it, this is really good advice here. Join the on-call team. I'm already inclined to disagree here, but let's see where we take this. This one may feel controversial, and it may not even be possible at your company. Of course, you should consider this advice only if your company has a healthy on-call environment. Every company is different, so I'm not going to say no for sure, but I definitely know more bad stories than good stories when it comes to on-call teams. That's just from my personal network. Probably depends on the company. The on-call team is composed of people who are willing to intervene if something goes wrong during and outside business hours, i.e. at night, during weekends, and on bank holidays. Your company may have a dedicated team of SRE site reliability engineers for it, and or your team may not be responsible for DevOps work. But if you have the possibility to join the on-call team, whether it's for the product you work on or for the whole company, depending on its size, I would suggest doing it. And I don't know if I would suggest doing it. Most engineers, I think, work more than 100% of the time. 100% of the time would be 40 hours, right? In normal work week. I don't know many that actually work 40 hours. So to add to that some nights, weekends, and bank holidays, a recipe for a burnout, probably. I don't know how I feel about this one. But let's keep reading. I'm curious to see what the reasons are. Here are some advantages of joining this team. You learn a lot about behind the scenes of the products and services that make the company thrive. Sure. You feel more empathetic to your coworkers as you experience the weight of responsibility of whenever something bad occurs, especially at night. You feel more engaged with the company as you invest more of your time into making sure the products and services work as expected for the customers. I'm not sure if this is just my experience, but I do these things during my normal work hours and sometimes after work hours. I'm not sure if I want to do this stuff over a bank holiday. Again, a healthy on-call environment is required before embracing these responsibilities. At my first company, I joined the on-call team who was responsible for all services approximately 2 months before leaving. I wish I had joined earlier as I learned a lot during those few months, and this additional responsibility was well compensated. Yeah, if you need the money and this is an opportunity you have, I guess I don't see why not, if you're willing to work the weekends and so on. At my second and current company, I joined the on-call team who is responsible for the service of a single product 2 to 3 months after my first day. For now, I'm only intervening during business hours, but eventually I will be able to respond to pages during the night and on the weekends. Look, I don't think I generally agree that in order to advance in your career, you have to join an on-call team. If that's the challenge that you want and it's compensated well and you don't mind working holidays and weekends, then I guess by all means. All right, next one. Change teams. I could see 3 reasons why you would move to another team. You're too comfortable in your current position and you would like to get out of your comfort zone. Valid reason. You don't really like the projects or scope of the team and you wish to work on projects that you enjoy more. Yeah, this is kind of what I was alluding at. I don't think it's that uncommon for people to hop teams because of this part here, especially if it's your first role and you don't really know what you want to do long term and you experience that type of workflow in that team, whatever that may be, and decide, hey, I want to go in a different direction. Sometimes you could just switch a team within the same company and not have to switch companies. The relations with your coworkers and or manager have deteriorated and you want some fresh air while still being part of the company. Yeah, that's another good reason. People don't really leave companies that much. They usually leave managers and coworkers. It's the other people who make or break your experience in a lot of cases. If you see yourself in one of these situations, then I encourage you to consider a new team instead of resigning and looking for a new company. I mean, looking for a new company is also fine. It depends. I don't understand why Oh, okay. Maybe I'm rushing a little bit. Hold on. Changing to a new company is exhausting, and you may lose things that you really appreciated, such as coworkers, engineering culture, employee benefits. Yeah, but you may also gain a bunch of things. You might gain better benefits, better coworkers, more team options. I don't know if I agree with this. Exercise all your options. Yeah, look at other teams within your company, but also look at other companies. There's nothing wrong with going to another company to a better team and experiencing something different. Some companies may be worse, some companies may be better. But imagine you get better compensation, better team, better management, and so on. That is possible. I've gone through that myself. I've changed companies and was happier in the end. I think team hopping is great for the following reasons. The organization have the new team may be different. Rituals, ways of working together, so you get more experience in this field. Sure. You can bring positive changes that you learned from the previous team and improve the code review process, tools, libraries, and rituals, thus becoming a good practice advocate at your company. You can help your new teammates when they have to work on projects owned by your previous team, i.e. knowledge spreading efficiently from one team to the other. You can learn new tools, languages, libraries, architectures, and ways of solving problems. In other words, become a better developer. Possibly, you get to work in better conditions if your change is due to reason 2 or 3 mentioned earlier. 1 year before leaving my first company, I decided to move to another team. Several teams asked me to join them, but if I could have split myself into multiple parts, I would have gladly joined them all. Actually, some companies, at least one of the companies I worked at in the past, allowed you to do split time between teams. Somebody from one team would do part-time on your team and you would do part-time on theirs. That was a really cool opportunity that I never quite managed to get, but I always thought that was cool. When I joined the new team, I felt like my senior title was not legitimate anymore. I had to learn new code-based tools and practices. Sure, I kept my soft skills and my knowledge about the business and products, but my technical skills took a hit. Learning something new was great, of course, but I wasn't the technical referent of the team anymore. Though, whenever the team had to contribute to projects of my previous team, I could help them in a more efficient way. Throughout time, the feeling of not deserving my title faded away, and I became even better as I gathered more skills. This is also very common for software engineers in general. Some call it imposter syndrome. When you step out of your comfort zone, you, by definition, going to be uncomfortable, and I think that's very normal and expected. That being said, I think changing teams should not happen too frequently. I stayed at my first team for more than 5 years, and I switched to a new one for 1 year and eventually left the company for reasons unrelated to this new team. If you feel like your situation fits in one of those 3 reasons, I would advise you to consider changing, but only if you stayed at least 1 full year with your current team. I wasn't sure at first what he meant by don't do it too fast, but if 1 year is the metric, then I guess 1 year is probably the minimum. You don't want to stay too little and you don't want to overstay on a team. I think 1 year is a reasonable amount of time to feel if you belong with your current team or not. If you cannot wait for a whole year, then it means the situation is quite critical, and I would suggest involving a manager and or their manager to address the urgency. Yeah, if you're not feeling like you could stay a year with your company, there's definitely some underlying causes there and probably should be looked at. Next advice, writing blog posts. This one should just be right, but it felt too short. Writing is one of the most important skills developers should have. A lot of our daily work involves writing code, master scene, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, we just talked about it earlier. Writing is one of the best asynchronous ways of communicating with people. This is also true. And a lot of times what I find in software is that you will have teammates on other parts of the globe, and the best way to communicate with them is through email or a Teams message or something like that. And it's very important to communicate as clear and as succinctly as possible. You don't want to wait another day on another answer because somebody misunderstood you. So certainly this is incredibly important. Writing is very important for software engineers. They can read your messages whenever it suits them and they're not interrupted in the middle of their task and can focus on it. Of course, in some situations, synchronous communication is a way better of communicating, i.e. video calls and in-person meetings to address some urgency or remove ambiguity or misinterpretations. But in my experience, developers are more exposed to writing than talking on a daily basis. Writing blog posts is interesting for the following reasons. Practice makes perfect. The only way to improve a skill is by practicing it. If you're not sure you're doing it right, you may ask for help from someone who does it well in your opinion, so they can mentor you on this topic. You can also read documentation and blog posts about it. That being said, the most important thing is to start practicing, even if your first articles have some flaws. It forces you to know the subject you're talking about. This is a great way of actually learning things by diving deeper than the usual. and to a specific subject. Yeah, I think this is very true. If you're going to put something on paper, again, just like with writing documentation earlier or onboarding people, this is a similar idea here. You're going to have to dive a little bit deeper and understand it a little bit better. Writing will expose things that you don't know about the subject, and you will have an opportunity to fill those gaps through that process. I think this is very valuable. I try to run my own blog. It's tough, not the best at writing, and I need to do more of it. It develops your personal brand. The more people are interested in your blog posts, the more followers you get, and the more influential you become. You can write articles on your personal blog and on your company's blog. Writing for your company is great at the beginning because it already has a base of readers and followers. However, you have less freedom on the subjects you want to talk about, as it's the company's choice. This is something I have not considered, is writing for my company, but it could be a really good opportunity depending on the company and the situation that you're in. Do not expect to become popular after the first blog. It takes a long time to become influential. You might even never reach that moment, and that's fine. You should write for you and improve your writing skills and share your discoveries with the community. You should not care about how many likes or followers you get. Yeah, this is also true. If the goal here is to improve over time, you probably will get following as you do improve and your blog posts become more interesting. Yes, it is a great moral boost to get that type of recognition, but your goal should not be to increase those numbers. Your goal should always be to improve your writing and share knowledge. I started this journey by publishing on my first company's engineering blog, the most accurate way to schedule a function in a web browser. It even got a mention in JavaScript weekly newsletter, which is awesome. Congrats, dude. This is great. Then in March 2021, I started writing blog posts on Dev2, and I continued to do so occasionally. I also posted an article on Hacker Noon. I didn't really like their editing on the title, and it felt like Dev2 would be my main blog medium, at least for now. I actually recommend starting your own. Buy a domain name and set up a blog. It's really not difficult nowadays. It's very easy. You could do it so many different ways. You could build a static site. You could build a WordPress site. One, you're going to learn some valuable things, hopefully through that process of deploying and maintaining your own site. But two, if you want to work on your brand recognition, which is the other thing that he's talking about here, I really think you want to own that. You want to own that domain name. You want to own that space on the internet and not be in the hands of Dev2 or Medium or whatever. They might shut down your account tomorrow, and there probably is nothing you could do about it. It's fine to write on Dev2, on LinkedIn posts or whatever, but I would still recommend running your own blog first. And then maybe in addition to that, you could post some snippets to these other platforms. Let's go into the next one. Things I wish I had done differently. Be careful when introducing new things to the team. This is especially true the more senior you become. Though even juniors should feel capable of introducing new things to the team, be it libraries, languages, paradigms, ways of working together, and so on. As a junior, you will be more easily challenged by the senior folks on your team. However, the more senior you become, the easier it gets to convince people, especially juniors, to be on board. Fair. I actually never thought too much about this part, but it's true. As you gain more experience, hopefully your input carries a little bit more weight. Although I think that juniors and seniors and staff, engineers, and everybody else definitely brings or should bring value to the team, and their input should be considered at all levels. Back at my first company, a few months before moving to another team, I was in a position where I could propose ambitious changes to the codebase. At that point, I had been learning about the functional programming paradigm for a couple of years, and I was convinced of its advantages. Over a few months, I introduced functional concepts to two teams, including mine, and for the record, these presentations occurred before I introduced the heavy changes to the codebase. I thought these training sessions sufficiently convinced people to adopt this new paradigm, and at the moment, it was true. People were nodding their heads. They understood the new concepts, the pros and cons, and what we could use to improve our projects. At one point after these presentations, we saw an opportunity. It was at the beginning of the summer, so business activity would be quite slow for a couple of months. Over the first half of the year, we encountered a few bugs and had to use dirty workarounds in one of our oldest systems. We could drastically improve the testability and developer experience of that system using functional concepts and the types of TypeScript. That old system was initially developed as an early version of TypeScript that did not provide great type features. Okay. In other words, it was the perfect time to do some refactoring. I showed a proof of concept to the team using functional and type-level programming with TypeScript to greatly improve that system. We were all convinced of its benefits and decided to go further with a production-ready implementation. I was responsible for creating the tasks, planning what could be done in parallel, and I posted regular updates to Slack channel where stakeholders could follow the progress. Cool. I developed the V2 of the system as a library within our own code base, making it an independent module where it was possible to test every possible edge case we could think of, with unit tests since side effects were finally under control. Despite introducing a lot of new concepts, functions, and code changes, everyone was fine with it. I got approvals during code reviews. I was heavily inspired by the FPTS library, which has a way of coding that differs from regular JavaScript, some could say. We couldn't simply import the library in our codebase due to constraints I will not mention here, so I had to reintroduce some of its functions and data types myself, with minor adaptations. I shared most presentations about these changes and got positive feedback. The lack of opposition led me to continue deeper into this rabbit hole. I'm sensing some issues brewing up here, since this is one of the first things that were highlighted or bolded in this article. Once the new system was finished and tested, we had to replace the old system that was scattered everywhere in the codebase. It was used in a lot of places, so making the migration from the old system to the new proved to be very tedious. I had never overworked so much in my life. I loved refactoring the old codes to what I thought was a better version, so I didn't count the hours. Over 2 months, I have spent around 10 hours a day working on it, including the weekends. I've seen some other developers fall into this exact trap where they're so passionate about refactoring that they end up doing it on the weekends. I don't recommend that. Once the work was done, I took 2 weeks off. They were already planned for a long time. While I was gone, the team was unfortunate to get a quite important incident. They struggled to identify the root cause and find a fix for it. The issue was located inside the new system, which didn't look like the rest of the codebase. The team wasn't familiar with it, as I was pretty much the only one who developed it. And that's the expected outcome here. If you spend a bunch of weekends refactoring something pretty much single-handedly, you're now the only one that knows how to fix it. During my presentations, people understood that these new tools and practices and agreed with the changes, but once they were alone in the middle of all the novelty, they rightfully felt lost. Presentations are a thing, but if you don't practice what you just learned, you will eventually forget it. Plus, presenting each concept separately is not the same as using them all together. It adds complexity to an already difficult subject to learn. Yeah, and I found this to be the case too. When somebody goes a little rogue and refactors something and it seems like a good idea and everybody is on board and they present it, you just don't really pick up all the subtleties and details. And when it comes down to debugging it, it can be really tough for the first time, especially when that developer is not around. Long story short, I introduced a lot of new concepts to my team, and while they were on board during my presentations, the changes I brought to the project greatly damaged their ability to fix a critical issue while I was gone. When I got back and learned about the incident, I offered to share more presentations with them so they could get more familiar with the new code. In reality, I should have never gone down the rabbit hole in the first place. It was not a pragmatic solution. The type improvements were great, but the whole new functional system was a mistake. You should not bring important changes to the team just because you're comfortable with these changes. You have to keep the buzz factor in mind. The buzz factor is a measurement of risk resulting from information and capabilities not being shared among team members, derived from the phrase "in case they get hit by a bus." I thought I would stay in that team for long enough that everyone would eventually be familiar with the new code and I could teach them a little by little. But a few months after these events, I joined another team. Looking back, I feel bad for dropping this hard-to-maintain module for a few months before leaving them and almost burning myself out because of it. Yep, and that's why I was also recommending not to work on the weekends or bank holidays or anything like that, partly because of the burnout being very real in our field. Whether you're an individual contributor or a manager, if a senior teammate introduces important changes like these ones, I strongly advise you to really challenge their proposition. I'm sure a better trade-off could have been found in my case. If you're in the same position as I was, I encourage you to think twice before committing. Is this really a pragmatic solution? Are you sure the scope is well defined and rabbit holes well identified? Are you doing this for the good of the team or because you like it? Will the team be comfortable with it when you aren't around to help them? Yeah, I think these are all like valid questions. I do think that it's important to speak your mind and introduce new concepts and ideas, and some of them will not work. That is normal. We all make mistakes, and in hindsight, of course, everything is clear, but at the time it may not be. And if you didn't do this here, then you would also not have learned any of these lessons. As you become more senior, be a little more cautious about the changes that you introduce to the team. It's still important to propose changes because some of them may be necessary and may be good ones. Do not let your emotions take over in front of the team. Okay, I see where this is going. I've had moments where I strongly disagree with whatever a manager or coworker was sharing with the team during a meeting. I let everyone in the room know it bothered me, thus starting a conflict publicly. I wanted to show my peers it was fine to disagree with someone else's decision. However, this type of behavior is not healthy. People may feel uncomfortable when a conflict becomes visible/obvious, like in these situations. It's not fair to put them into these situations. This may create division within the team where some agree with the person A and others agree with person B. A team must remain united and be efficient. Generally speaking, it shows some lack of self-control and discipline, and some inability to take a step back and think about the situation. I'm not saying that it's easy to contain our emotions. After all, we're human beings, not machines, but it's also important to show respect to our peers and avoid disturbing the course of the meeting. Yeah, I think at the end of the day, it all comes down to showing respect. You want to be respectful to your peers, even if whatever they bring up is a silly idea. Maybe talk to them after the meeting, or if you're going to confront them in front of others, do it in as respectful manner as possible for all the reasons mentioned here. In my opinion, the right thing to do is wait for the end of the meeting, then immediately go talk to that person in a one-on-one meeting. Talk to your manager about the situation and find a way to fix it. It's important to trigger this one-on-one immediately after the meeting that made you feel this rush of emotions. The more time passes, the worse the situation gets. Yeah, that's true. If there's an issue with your teammates, you want to address it as soon as possible and not wait too much on that. In my experience, talking with other person always helped in improving the situation. Communication is key here. Without social interactions, we cannot go far in a company or in personal lives. Dip a foot into the hiring market. When I joined the first company as an intern, I had a 30-minute interview with my future manager, and that's it. I did a quick culture fit interview and I was accepted. After that, I didn't set foot on a hiring market for 7.5 years. Once I decided to leave, my single and brief hiring market experience was clearly not representative of what I was about to deal with. The hiring process when you apply for senior positions with approximately 8 years of experience is definitely not composed of just a 30-minute behavioral interview. Yeah, that's very true. After reading the most heated tech job market in history, I felt I was ready to try it. I updated my LinkedIn profile and set myself as open to work. I felt overwhelmed. Dealing with all the job propositions that rained down on me was exhausting. From September 2021 to end of October 2021, I must have received 5 to 10 propositions per business day. I had to take PTOs to address the situation, and I spent a significant amount of my weekends dealing with it. Initially, I was able to answer every recruiter's message, but when I was in a situation where I had to work all day, I was still employed at my current company at that time. I was in the middle of moving to another city, which was quite stressful for me. I was engaged in a hiring process with several companies, and I keep receiving new job propositions. It became increasingly hard to answer all of those new messages from recruiters. Yeah, that's also true. Once you open yourself to work and start applying, at some point, you're probably going to get many interviews and calls and messages from all over the place. It can get overwhelming, especially when you have a full-time job and things going on in your life outside of the job. It's not a fun time. I know that feeling. I ended up writing my own message template containing my wishes for the next job. I shared as many details as I could: size of the company, the culture, remote work compensation, technical challenges, and so on. But despite this, I couldn't keep up with all the messages. To all the recruiters that contacted me at the time and to whom I never got a chance to answer, I am sorry. I was overwhelmed by the situation. But dealing with LinkedIn messages was not the most difficult part of it. The most exhausting part was actually doing the interviews. I never got the chance to train data structures and algorithms before, as I never felt the need to change companies. I trained mainly on lead code, and I also bought a few books to help me out: Cracking the Code Interview and System Design Interview Volume 1. In addition, I had to remember and present some of the most impactful projects I worked on in detail. This is where the work log we mentioned previously could be a very interesting asset. Yeah, that's super true right here. I also had to do that in addition to all of this here. Once I finally accepted an offer, I handed the resignation to my manager. If I remember correctly, I got plus 25% base salary increase with this new offer. There was some additional compensation included and overall better employee benefits for my situation, working remotely. The reason I encourage you to try interviewing from time to time is for this: you will get some experience along the way, so when you finally join a new company, you will feel less overwhelmed. You can check your worth on the market and potentially ask for some compensation adjustments at your current company. If you can get a job offer, chances are it will help you get what you think you deserve at your current position. Yeah, keeping your interview skills, keeping your resume and everything else ready to go is a really good idea, because even if you don't want to leave the company, you may want to shut down or get rid of your team. So you always got to be ready. Unfortunately, this is just the reality of being a software developer in 2025. Probably was the same reality before as well, but it's a little more brutal in the market right now. So this advice is even more important today, I think, than it was when this article was written a few years back. At my first company, I got good salary raises, between 7 and 10% year on year, except for the last year. Despite not being satisfied with the one I got in the last year, I thought I would have gotten an even better raise the next year anyway. That moment never came, as I quit before it happened. Since I got good raises for the most of my career at that company, I never felt like checking what I was worth in a hiring market. I wish I had done that earlier. That doesn't necessarily mean I would have left the company earlier, but at least I would have gotten some experience and could have possibly asked for a salary adjustment instead of a raise. Yeah, the experience I think he's talking about is interviewing experience, which is a different experience from working at a company. It requires a different skill set, especially for software developers, because there's a lot more to it than just behavioral interviews. It's important to maintain that skill. Don't get me wrong, getting a 10% raise is great, but if your salary is 15 to 20% below the market tells you your worth, in the end, that 10% raise isn't good enough. And how can you know if you have the compensation you deserve? By experiencing the market yourself. Also by staying in touch with former coworkers that experience the market themselves. Yeah, absolutely. You don't necessarily need to hop a job if you get a new offer, but getting that offer is going to tell you what others think you're worth, and that's not a bad advice. Doing interviews doesn't force you to leave the company. You can do tens of interviews while staying at your current company as long as you don't sacrifice your work for doing interviews. This is why I had to take PTO and I had to do interviews early in the morning and during lunch breaks. Definitely don't overwhelm yourself with the interview prep, especially if you're happy at your company, but just a little bit is gonna go a long way when you finally do need those skills. And hopefully you don't, but if you do, you're gonna be very thankful that along the way you practiced a little bit, took some interviews, and so on. Ending thoughts. First of all, thank you for reading so far. I hope this article was useful to you. I think you noticed all this advice is not really technical. Most of them are about soft skills. Maybe I'll write another article with advice that is more about technical skills or hard skills. Let me know if you would be interested in such content. One last thing I wanted to share with you. Stay in touch with some of your former coworkers, especially those who inspired you. They are people you admired because they did a great job according to your standards. They may have been excellent managers or influential technical leaders that you really appreciated. This is important because it will help you improve and become a better developer. They may even convince you to join their company or team, which is healthy as long as the frequency is reasonable. Everyone should build a network that helps them become better people. If you have the occasion to try this advice out, and if it works out for you, please share your experience. I'm really curious to get feedback about this advice and see if I can apply to other situations of my own. As always, feel free to share your opinion in the comments. See you next time. Yeah, this was a great read overall. I'm certainly going to respond to this in a blog format as well, as I collect a little more thoughts and put my own thoughts on paper. And to those who are currently watching this video, I hope this was useful and interesting to you as well as it was for me. And I will see you in the next one.